It was the same court, and rewind 34 years ago, and here we are again, and me thinking, gosh, have we not made any progress?
First, though, 4 weeks ago, a black barrister was told he couldn't park in an East London court car park after a security guard mistook him for a defendant. Stephen Akinsanya says the incident illustrates a lack of progress on racism within the criminal justice system. He joins us now. Thank you very much indeed for coming into the studio, Stephen. It's lovely to see you here. Just talk us through that incident and what exactly happened.
Hi, well, good afternoon to both of you. It's about 4 weeks ago. I arrived at a court. I must make a correction. It was not an East London court. It was a London court. It was misrepresented, and I want to correct that.
Sure.
But it was a London court, which I've been going to for well over 3 decades now. And I pulled up to the car park to park my car. It's one of the few car parks that you can park in London. And to my surprise, when the security guard met me to take my details, his first comment to me was, "You can't park here." And I thought, that's strange. No one's ever said that to me before. So, of course, my response was, well, why not? So, well, defendants can't park in the car park. And I was just shocked that he'd assumed I was a defendant. I think it may have been reported somewhere else that I was wearing my robes, but that can't be true, because it would be absurd if I pulled up wearing my full regalia, wig and gown, for someone not to recognise that I was a barrister and to then mistake me for a defendant. I was wearing a suit, the barrister's tunic shirt, which is what we all wear before we put our bands on. But it was just his immediate assumption that I was a defendant.
When you said why you were there, what was his response then?
Well, he was embarrassed, extremely embarrassed that he had made the wrong assumption. He was a young man, and so I did scold him because I was slightly perturbed that his immediate response or immediate question was that, and it reminded me of what happened to me at that same court 34 years ago when I started practicing.
And what was that? Exactly the same thing?
Well, on that occasion, I arrived at that court building, and now I have to say in those days, I wasn't driving to court, but the security guard within the court building inside the entrance assumed that I was a defendant on trial and pointed me to the court list where I would find my name to know which court I was appearing in. And it was only when I said to him, look, here's my barrister's bag, I've got my wig and gown in there and my copy of Archbold, which is our legal practitioner's book, that he too was embarrassed because he had made an assumption about who I was.
You say that the recent experience reminded you of that experience all that time ago, but I bet, Stephen, that in between times there have probably been any number of other examples of prejudice that you've faced?
Not so much me, but the stories from others. I've been very fortunate in the time that I've been in practice that it's been very limited, but it was just the fact that it was the same court, and rewind 34 years ago, and here we are again, and me thinking, gosh, have we not made any progress?
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the experiences of your fellow barristers, judges, and people within the criminal justice system.
Well, there have been many examples of black barristers particularly who have arrived at court to be questioned about whether they are in fact a defendant. Assumptions made by judges, sometimes seeing someone in court, not just barristers but solicitors who've attended court with their client and been told to step in the dock. Just similar examples of people just being mistaken for anything other than being a barrister. I even heard of a recent account by a colleague of mine in the Court of Appeal, where one of the judges assumed that the young black lady sitting behind counsel in an appeal in the appellate court was a support staff for the CPS. And I think they were talking about getting some documents produced to the court, and the judge said, well, you have a member of the CPS here, ask them to do it. And my colleague looked behind him and said, well, there's no one from the CPS here. That's my pupil. She's a pupil barrister. And of course that judge too was embarrassed.
Sure. You revealed the latest story on a podcast called Being Black in Criminal Justice, Is the Profession Racist? So what would your immediate answer to that very blunt question be?
I wouldn't say it's racist. I'm very conscious of banding that word around. I'm a child of the 70s, and I can recount numerous truly racist experiences that I've had as a child growing up as a young man. But I wouldn't want to say the profession is racist, but I just think there are issues in terms of diversity, assumptions being made about those who are black and brown. And despite initiatives to try and redress the thinking of the senior judiciary and those who work within the criminal justice system, all the way down to a car parking attendant or member of security staff, there are these assumptions being made which need to be addressed.
At what point in the system of application to get into whatever level it is of the justice system that you're seeking to get into professionally, what part of that system is really failing? Are there as many applicants applying as then there should be a percentage of people being successful? Is there something in that selection process that is excluding people?
The first thing I'll say is it's a very arduous process. It's a very difficult process to be appointed to the judiciary. There are many people apply for few places. But across the last 10 years, there has been a 1% increase in the number of black judges being appointed. And the question initially is, well, are they applying? Well, the data seems to suggest that they are applying in large numbers. It then translates to, well, why are they not being appointed then? It can only be either that they don't make it through the selection process for whatever reason. They get through the first stages, but when it comes to the sifting and the latter stages of appointment, something's going wrong. Or as some people choose to feel, they're not good enough. But I refuse to accept that.
So what happens in those stages? Can you tell us a little bit more detail?
Well, I've not applied to become a circuit judge, for example, but there are initial stages where everybody applies through a test, a testing process. There is then a sifting process based on your application, references being taken up. And then there are further exercises that you would undertake in terms of practical role play and that sort of thing to see how you cope with the situation of being a judge. And then a decision is made. I'm not sure entirely how that decision is made as to who to appoint, but it just seems to those of us who discussed in that podcast that something is going wrong, because there has been an increase in terms of diversity, for example, with Asian judges being appointed. But when it comes to black judges, it's not the same.
Right.
And people are asking the question, why?
I've read about something called secret soundings.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, I'm not so sure that they still exist. Some people think that they do, but it used to be the sort of, I think, nod and a wink. People are spoken to behind the scenes. People who regularly appear in front of certain judges, and there are secret soundings taken about whether a person is a suitable type of character to be appointed to the bench. I'm not so sure that that is still the case of how it works, but of course there are those who think that secret soundings still exist.
What would you change if you could change something? Because it's an intriguing picture you paint of somebody with your experience still not being able to really know what happens in a selection process behind these closed doors. That's so difficult, isn't it?
Well, I have to say that the Judicial Appointments Committee, they have done a lot of work to try and demystify what people perceive is really happening with the selection process, and there are various programs that they have run because they recognize that there's a problem. If there wasn't a problem, they wouldn't run the exercises. But I think increasingly now they are making the application process more visible to potential candidates in terms of where to find the literature, where to find the help, mentors, the actual process is advertised on their website. And all of that's true, but something is still going wrong. I get that there are so many people applying for few places, but when you translate to the number of people being appointed, something's not right. There's one black High Court judge currently. There was only one before. There are no Court of Appeal black judges, no Supreme Court black judges. Of the 3,497 judges, there are only 43 black judges.
Right. It's the wrong figure, isn't it? What about other areas that might be underrepresented? I mean, are women equally represented? Are people from state-educated backgrounds equally represented?
It's improving, but when we talk about diversity, it's not just limited to black barristers. Those from what they call protected characteristics. I know people from the Roma background, women, the disabled. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of general diversity, but it is improving.
Yeah. And just explain to anybody who's listening thinking, why does it matter quite so much? Shouldn't we be in a place where we can accept that I can understand your human experience, you can understand mine, aside from the characteristics that we have? Why is it so important in a court?
It's really important that those on trial, and not just defendants, but also those who are witnesses, complainants, the system fundamentally has to be a system which we see as being fair. And in order for it to be fair, in a multicultural society, it has to be representative of the community which the criminal justice system serves. And so that is why, in my view, it's important that the judiciary, and indeed those in practice, barristers, it reflects society. Now, there has been an increase from when I started in the number of black barristers. That's undoubtedly true because I see it when I go to court. But if you're on trial in an area in London and even in our major cities, Birmingham, Manchester, there are no black judges. And so you're on trial, you don't see that many people who look like you, who are representing people who look like you. You don't see members of the judiciary who look like you. And that ties in also to the fact of wanting to scrap jury trials, because perhaps the only safe net is to have a jury of your peers containing those who look like you, which gives you a chance of actual and perceived fairness. And that's why it's so important.
I was just about to ask you about jury trials, but I think you've stated your claim on that one too. A couple of other quick-fire questions on very big issues of the day, if that's okay, while you're here. What do you think would best speed up a very backlogged court system?
Investment. It's not about juries. It's about investing in the criminal justice system at all levels, from staff to ensuring defendants get to court on time, that technical equipment works, that there is efficiency, that we don't have non-sitting court days because of costs, which means judges are restricted in the number of cases that they hear. I know we had the issue of having 90 Nightingale courts to sort of deal with the backlog, but just being more efficient and spending the money that is necessary for our criminal justice system, of which we should be immensely proud in this country, works.
How do you secure an early release system that both protects victims of people who are going to be released in the community, but also protects people who in future cases, not the case that we're seeing at the moment play out, but in future cases who might feel that a partisan or political judgment was made about their release because the law had been changed to allow exemptions?
Good question. We have to have a system effectively where people who are punished for the most serious crimes actually serve the times that serve the sentence which is imposed. And of course, again, it comes down to investment. We should not be talking about releasing people because we don't have enough prison spaces, which then causes public uproar because people are being released halfway through their sentence, when there is little thought given to the victims of these crimes. And so it's really a matter of investment, and also looking at those perhaps serving what we call indefinite indeterminate sentences, rather, IPP sentences, and looking at those who should no longer be in prison, looking at those offenders, both men and women, who should not be serving sentences for the offences that they have committed, and perhaps dealing with those sentences in the community as a way of rehabilitation, but also punishment.
It's an absolute pleasure to meet you, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed for coming into Times Towers today. One final question, because this is International, World, Global and Interplanetary Eclipse Day. You witnessed the last solar eclipse where?
I remember it vividly. I was in B&Q car park. I'd gone to get I think I went to get some screws to fix the door, and I came out of the car park and the sky was dark, and I thought, hold on, it's only 5 o'clock. And I thought the world was going to end because I hadn't really paid attention to the news.
Right. Okay. Are you a bit more aware of today?
I certainly am. Okay. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Real pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. That is Stephen Akinsanya. If you wanted to go back and listen to that podcast, because that's how we invited Stephen onto the programme, it's called Being Black in Criminal Justice.